So first question, Monty, I'm going to ask from two different perspectives. Personally, what was this draft like for you as opposed to last year, meaning your family was here, where last year I remember you were still getting settled. I think you were living at Dave Sears' house, right?
Yep.
So how was it different just having your family here, where last year I think your kids were finishing up school, and so you were still trying to figure out how to get them out here?
Yeah, Dave, we joked about that, the guys upstairs, and they said that we thought about maybe going back to like the Rocky IV montage and said, we felt the draft went pretty well last year, so maybe I should go back into Dave's place, and just have the bed on the floor and sleep there, and we thought about doing that, but I don't know if the family would have really went with that, but it was last year was unique. Last year with the entire time we were focused. My family was still back in Nashville, and so that was maybe a little bit of a blessing last year that there was so much going on, and we had to condense the year, a whole year, into a short period of time. And so this year I'd say everything basically went in the time of year that a typical scouting process goes, and so that just provided structure, and the processes happened at the time they were supposed to. And so I would say there certainly wasn't any less work to do. Every draft there's just a boatload of prospects that you have to go through. There's a bunch of checkpoints that happen along the way. I'd say this year it just helped us that things happened in the time that they were supposed to happen. And then hey, I had to mix in being a husband and father too, and that's a good problem to try to sort through. And so a little bit different, but in the end I think we had to get to the same spot, and hopefully we did that and had another successful draft.
So professionally in the room, I remember our conversation at this time last year where you mentioned it's different when previously you're giving advice on who to pick, but obviously you're not making that decision. Now you are making that decision. You have the final say. And so now doing it a second time around, did you find it easier, less stressful, or did you have the same butterflies that you had last year?
Yeah, I think, Dave, we're always going to have those same butterflies. I think, it's a big moment for us, and a lot has gone into any time we select a player. That's been a process that's over a year in the making. And so, I think it's anxiety, it's wanting to do right, it's wanting the board to fall our way. And, I think ultimately, a lot of those decisions that we make during the draft, a lot of those have already been made. And so we've taken in all the input from our scouts that have gone through December meetings, February meetings, our April meetings, and then our input from our coaches that have evaluated the players, and they've also conducted a lot of interviews with the coaches. And so then we put all of our prospects through the structure and process of what we do, and those decisions on who exactly we're going to take, those really have been made by the Friday before, or at least the order in how we see players. And so then by the time we get to the draft and Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday afternoon, really we're evaluating trades that come up. We're evaluating, making decisions on draft strategy, moving around the board. It's not, hey, would you take this guy or this guy? Those discussions are already through. But that's always a cool moment when we got a few guys that we're hoping make it to a spot, or one guy that we're hoping, and then ultimately when that guy makes it and we pull that name off the board, that's a great responsibility that I have, and I love doing it.
So I'm assuming the Marvin Harrison Jr. decision was made. The question is, how early was it made for you? When in your mind did you say, this is the guy we want?
Yeah, and so our process with Marvin has been over, just like with all the prospects, over a year in the making. And so, I think really we want to get through the entire process of both the evaluation of the player, which in Marvin's case went through, really the end of the season, and then, we supplemented that with medical information, and then the interviews that we conducted. And the first time we interviewed Marvin was at the Combine with a formal interview, and then he was one of the players that we brought in for a 30 visit in the middle of April. And so, really ultimately, when the day that Marvin walked out of my office when he came to visit on his 30 visit, that was the day where in my head, I had absolutely zero reservations about picking him at number 4. And so I felt confident in Marvin as a player, felt confident in Marvin as a person. And so, felt really good about Marvin being our guy at number 4. And then it was just, hey, let's just wait and let the process play out and see if anything comes up. But really nothing ever came close to getting us to move off the pick. And we were excited to pull Marvin's name off at number 4 there.
So I did the Cotton Bowl, which was Ohio State, Missouri. So both of the Cardinals' first-round picks. We did not meet with Marvin Harrison because he didn't play. We did meet with Darius Robinson. I'll get to him in a second. But even though we did not meet with Marvin Harrison, whether it was Ryan Day or the head coach at Ohio State or other players or Urban Meyer was there, and I've known Urban for a long time, everybody spoke glowingly about Marvin the person. Obviously, you watch the film, you see how great of a player he is. How much, you mentioned the conversation you had with him, how much of just the person of Marvin Harrison did that sell you on this? He fits our culture and what we're trying to build here, as well as the talent.
Yeah, that's huge, Dave. That's huge. I mean, that's really when we have those 30 visits, when we conduct our interviews with the coaches, our scouts, that's when we really put the final stamp on what we feel as the player as a person. The tape is the tape. Now let's evaluate the person. And so, just in our constant meetings with Marvin, that we had multiple of those, just the maturity, the accountability, the dependability consistently stood out with him. And really, I think one thing that's really unique about Marvin, and it's not surprising based on where he's come from and his dad and seeing his dad, but just the plan that Marvin has and the plan that Marvin has had since high school, and he carried that into college. And I know he's going to carry it this week when he comes in here for the first time on Thursday, just the plan on how to get better and the way he takes care of his body, the rehab, the prehab, the plan he has for catching extra balls on the jugs machine. Marvin's very talented individual, but Marvin doesn't rest on his talent. He's pushing himself. He's working to get better. He wants to be great, and the great ones have those traits where they push themselves. And so, just getting to know Marvin and learning more about him, those things quickly shone through.
We did meet with Darius. Our meetings are obviously different than your meetings. We're doing television meetings, and so it's a lot of personal stories, but also asking him about him as a football player. And when you meet with players every week and coaches, like sometimes it's just another game, it's just another week, but there are certain guys that stand out because of their personality. And I think as the Valley is getting to know Darius, you can see why that he would stand out, because he's got a huge personality, very smart, loves football. Were you hoping, did you think that he would still be there? Were you concerned that he might be off the board? We
certainly were concerned. Yeah, absolutely. And so, Darius was a guy that it was actually interesting. So Darius was our first formal interview at the Senior Bowl. And so he was the first player of the week that we actually got to sit down with. And then once we got to the Combine, he just happened to be the first formal interview we had at the Combine. And so, unique with Darius in that we didn't bring Darius on a 30 visit. We didn't bring him on a 30 visit because we felt like we had enough exposures to him through our scouts in the fall, through multiple meetings with him at the Senior Bowl, and then through our meetings with him at the Combine. And so, I think we were more than comfortable with who Darius was as a person through those steps. And then, I think the day that he got here for his press conference, and when he sat in front of that group and really just the way he conveyed his thoughts and the maturity in what he's done with his NIL money and setting up his foundation. I mean, I think we all kind of looked around and we're like, holy moly, we can learn something from this guy, so just an impressive kid all the way around, just a guy that, obviously we're excited to add his talent on the field, but just excited to add the makeup and the leadership that we think he will eventually be able to grow into here off the field as well.
What's your vision for him, along with the coaching staff, in terms of how he fits in and where he might play, or is that still in development, those discussions?
I think definitely still in development. I think with Darius as well as all of our rookies, Marvin all the way down to the undrafted free agents that we signed, their process right now is to come in and carve out a role and find a way to help this team win. And no matter how big or small that role is, they're starting from zero. They're going to come in here on Thursday and Friday, hit the field for the first time, and they're behind. They are behind our current team right now in terms of mental. They are far behind on learning scheme, and they're far behind physically. Our team has been here in phase 1 and now in phase 2, just getting themselves in condition and getting themselves in football shape. So with Darius, I think our vision for him is the first versatility that he brings, that he can play on multiple spots on the front, that he can contribute in both the run and the pass game. But ultimately for Darius and everyone else, it's what they do from here on out going forward and how they can find a way to help this team win.
You mentioned that in the room on draft night, at least, I'm speaking specifically about the first round. I'm sure it's all the rounds. You talked about you're getting phone calls for trades. How active were the phones that first night, and how close were you guys to making a move, whether down or up, or using a pick or a player to get back into the first round?
Yeah, and I think for us, for at the first pick, number 4, it was all about us receiving calls, and so most of those calls occurred as we led up to the start of the draft, and so worked through some various scenarios, and really, like I said earlier, nothing really got us close to moving off that pick. As we got back to pick 27, I think we start making some exploratory calls. Hey, what would it cost to move up? We have players that, hey, we hope these guys make it to 27, and we make those calls. Hey, how expensive would it be? Ultimately, we thought it was too expensive to move up, and we were just very excited that Darius lasted to number 27. While at the same time, there was calls coming in for teams trying to get back into the first round, but ultimately we didn't want to pass up on the chance to get in Darius. I'd say where the calls really picked up was the next day when we were sitting at the top of the second round there, and I'd say we had upwards of 6 to 8 offers for that pick number 35 at the top of the second round there on Friday.
All right, I want to get back to that, but I'm curious in general, because you've been doing this a long time, in evaluating players, and I'm curious, you've talked about having conviction on a player when you take him. How do you keep your emotions out of it while still being convicted? Because I hear scouts say a lot, like, hey, you can't get too emotional about a guy and fall in love with a guy, because sometimes that could just be how you see it, and maybe you're missing something because you're invest too much. How do you balance that?
Yeah, and I think those are really the discussions that happen in the weeks leading up to the draft. And so, we're stacking our board, and we're not only stacking our board vertically, we're stacking it horizontally for just those occasions. And so, yes, we have an order on which we would take players. We have an order on which the order that we would take, whether it be corners or wide receivers or guards, and we work down that order. But we also have an order of who we would take across positions. So who would we take in this clump? Would we take this safety versus this tight end, or this running back versus this wide receiver? And so those discussions are made. And so, hey, that happens where there's a guy that we think we like, that we think would fit us, but those players, like, everybody else is looking at the same players. And so, the guys that we really like, sometimes they make it, sometimes they don't. And, it's really a home run when you find a player that you like and fits us both on and off the field, that he makes it to your pick, and you can just go ahead and feel good about picking that guy off the board.
So back to the second round, Max Melton, how do you envision his role based on who you have in the secondary? That's A. And then B, was he somebody, again, that you just felt so convicted about that, hey, we need to make sure we take this guy here?
We felt really good about Max. And so he would have been a guy we were comfortable taking at 35. And so that's one of those occasions where, hey, we were able to drop back and recoup a great second round or a third round pick there in the middle of the third round at 79, and still get Max at pick 43. And so, I think the thing that stands out about Max is, his athletic ability, his movement. He runs easy, he's fast, and it doesn't look like he's ever straining. He's an instinctive player. He's got quickness. He can cover up guys on the perimeter. He's also got experience playing inside. He plays the ball well, and he'll tackle, which is something that you don't typically see. And then, really a hidden part of Max's game is his special teams ability. He's blocked four punts in his career, which is, it's not often you see that. Yeah. And, really, knowing that he comes from a good program, Greg Schiano runs out there in Rutgers, and what's been asked of him. So, Max was a guy that we were excited to add. We think he fits us schematically in terms of his running and cover ability, and really excited to see what he can do here next week.
Yeah, you go back to the first time Schiano was at Rutgers and think about all the guys that made the NFL. There is definitely a culture there that he has built, and he's well respected for that. And when I saw the pick, I had a sense of where you guys were going and what you were thinking with him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd spent some time with Coach Schiano. He had some time with the New England organization, spent some time there, and so he was able to provide invaluable insight on Max as we went through our scouting process.
I had Trey. I'm pretty sure I remember Trey Benson at Oregon, and I know I had him this year at Florida State. It was actually a game they almost lost to Boston College, but man, he really stood out. Just whether it was watching tape or the games. is he somebody that you could see? Obviously, you have James Conner, who is terrific and the guy, but is Trey somebody that you could see morphing into a Pro Bowl caliber running back?
Yeah, I think the thing with Trey that stands out is he's a big back, much like James Conner, and so I think Trey fits us from a schematic standpoint in that he's instinctive, he's tough, he's physical, he's got good contact balance, he's able to run through and gain tough yards, and then one thing that stands out about Trey is that when he does have a crease, he has the speed to break it and pop the long run, something that you don't often see in running backs that are his size. So I think he complements James very well. I mean, James had a phenomenal year last year. Was really one of our, if not our top offensive players and most consistent players throughout the year. So, we think we ran the ball pretty well last year and really finished strong in that front. And we think that gives us a chance to control the clock, control the pace of the game, and, really just add another back that can complement James and his skill set. We just feel like that puts us in a good position offensively.
Monty, one other draft pick I want to ask you about, and it mentioned that sometimes you meet with players or coaches, and it's just another meeting. I'm sure you guys have those too, where you walk out there, okay, who's next? Mm-hmm. And then every now and then there's a guy that really stands out. I had Texas 4 times this year, and so we met with Christian Jones more than once, and he stood out. Again, great personality, a guy that you just kind of fall in love with talking to him. Was he somebody in terms of your meetings that stood out to you?
Yeah, impressive kid, Christian, no question. And he's a kid that we met with. We met with at the Senior Bowl. Had a couple of meetings with him down there at the Senior Bowl, and then our coaches had a chance to meet with him at the Combine. And really, every step of the way, everybody came out with much the same impression you did. Just a mature kid, and just think that his accountability level is very high. He's played a ton of snaps down there at Texas. Played against some really good players just in that league, and then some of their non-conference games, and really has held up well. And so, we're excited to add a tackle of his caliber at that point in the draft. You can never have enough offensive linemen, specifically can never have enough tackles. It's a hard position to find in the league. And so to find one with Christian's just really off-field makeup and then also his on-field production, it was an exciting add for us at that point in the draft.
We started this podcast talking about your former roommate, Dave Sears. I want to ask you about his role, because last year at this time, most people didn't know who he was. He was a little under the radar hire. But I remember I got a phone call, full disclosure. Chris Spielman has been a great friend of mine for a long time. We worked together for several years at ESPN, and he's one of my closest friends. He calls me and said, "You guys just got a guy that I really hated to lose." Mm-hmm. And he says, "Please tell him that I'm really pissed at him for leaving," because Dave was in Detroit, and they loved him there, and I think Dave deserves some credit for what they built there with the Lions. Tell me about Dave, your relationship with him, and how you see his role continuing to grow with the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Dave has been invaluable to me and the rest of the organization since he got here. And so, our relationship goes back more than 20 years ago to when, I first started off with the Houston Texans. And so Dave really kind of took me under his wing, along with another guy that's on our staff, Rob Kissel. Both those guys, I owe a lot to them in terms of what they did for me just developmentally and bringing me along in the business. And so the chance to add both of them, and specifically Dave, what he's done for our group, just not only in the evaluation process, but really on a day-to-day basis, and even more so what he's done in terms of conveying our system and teaching our structure and getting that passed on to our scouts and being able to communicate. And when I'm not able to, be on that day-to-day hands-on approach, Dave's able to take that off my plate and really, develop and continue to institute our system and our processes and our structure. And so, Dave's done a fantastic job. His evaluation ability is second to none. And we're really fortunate to have him here in our organization.
I want to ask you a couple of questions about Kyler. What did you see from him when he came back healthy and played the final 2 months of the season that leaves you confident going into 2024? Everyone that I've talked to has said, it's amazing how all in he is, here every day. Heard he came after the press conferences last week to meet with Marvin Harrison and to say hello to Darius, all in. What are some of the things you saw, whether it's on the field but also off the field, that leaves you really confident where he is?
Yeah, I think we're just really excited with the way things are going across the program. But specifically with Kyler is especially this offseason, he can focus on being a great teammate, getting himself ready, getting himself more acclimated to the offense. And so, I think that's a really maybe overlooked part of what Kyler did last year, and just the fact that he was coming off a major knee injury. And so just to get himself to where he was at physically, but then also mentally, the challenge that he had to learn an entirely new offense with not being able to practice it until November, not being able to be on the field until the November timeframe. And so, really took a month there where, not that he played bad that first month, but like just trying to get acclimated to everything. And then that last month of the season, really when he hit his stride and our team hit our stride offensively, and we were able to really put it all together. And so the fact that we can hopefully pick up where that left off, and Kyler can spend the time being the starting quarterback and not being in the rehab and trying to get himself ready, I think that's going to put us in a better position here this offseason as we head into OTAs here in the next month, and then as we take a break, and then once we get rolling here into training camp.
Was there a moment or conversation with him, whether it was a conversation you had or JG, that stood out, that really felt like, okay, Kyler is confident in himself? Because when you have that injury, and he had not had an injury like that in his career, and I think you never know how a player is going to respond from that. Was there anything that stood out to you about how he came through that process?
I think really from the moment JG got here, and from when I got here, I think for all of our players, the expectation is high, and so really just to lay out expectations and really, that's what we expect out of our players every day. And so, when we put that out there, we've had multiple players just rise up and meet that. And so I don't think there was ever just an enlightening moment that just hit. I think from the moment that we got here, it was, hey, these are the things that we need to do as an organization. This is as a football program. These are the expectations. These are clearly laid out, and this is how we're going to get better. This is how we're going to win. And Kyler, along with a lot of our players, rose up and met those, and they continue to meet those. And that's what's ultimately going to determine if we can get this thing rolling and be successful.
So along those lines, Monty, when you look back at last year, was it harder than you thought to kind of overhaul everything and build the culture the way you wanted it? Did it meet your expectations? Obviously, you're still in the process. It's only been a year, but in terms of where everything started to where you are now, was it more challenging than you thought, or about what you expected?
Yeah, I think with that, I don't know that you ever quite know what to expect. And I think really all you can control is day in and day out, and whatever comes across our plate or whatever we can control on a daily basis to help our football program. I think just staying in the now and concentrate on those scenarios are what makes us the best. And, I think, we throw it around. I think it's thrown around a lot, like culture and changing the culture. And I think really ultimately, culture is what we do on a daily basis. And so for us, just setting those expectations, and all of us, no matter what our job was or is, coming in on a daily basis and doing what our job is at a high level, and doing what we can do at that moment to help our team, put our team in a successful situation, that's culture. And so when we then bring new people into the building, whether it's coaches or scouts or players or equipment people or trainers, whatever it is, they come in, and we don't hand them a pamphlet and says, this is our culture. They come in and they see it. They see it every day. And when our new players get here, that's the responsibility of them to look around and say, well, this is how we work. This is how we meet. This is how we practice. This is how we lift. This is how we eat. And so that's when the culture starts running itself, when we have the people in the building that are operating at a high level and doing it consistently. That's how a culture gets established, and that's how a culture gets sustained.
I may need to pick your brain, because like when I'm traveling, I need to figure out a good workout plan and a good eating plan. This culture, I need my own culture to keep myself together.
You and me both.
How about the scouting? A couple more, we'll let you go, because I appreciate your time and I know you got other things to do. But the scouting process, how I know what you implemented is different than what was here before. How has that gone? Where are you in that process this year compared to last year?
Yeah, I feel really good about where we're at with that, Dave. I just, before the scouts left town when they were here for the draft, we had a short meeting, and just told them how proud I was of them. I mean, I throwing a lot at them over the last year, and really had changed the order of operation and what was required of them throughout the year, and put more on their plate earlier in the process. And so, I think it's an ongoing process of just continuing to get comfortable with the language, the grading scale, and then just continuing to add to our Rolodex of players of, just so we have comparisons that we can make and knowing our team and identifying where we are at as a team. And so feel really good about where we are with that process, feel that we're always going to get better with more time on it. But, just really hats off to our scouting staff and the way that they've jumped in and now they've been through an entire year. And so they've seen the entire year process. And so I think that's going to continue to get smoother as we go. It never takes away the volume of the work. It's still a mountain of work. And we're just really starting that again for 2025. And those guys are well on their way of putting us in a position to be ready for the 2025 draft. But it never ends. It's ongoing. You can never let your guard down. And it's something that I know our guys are going to be ready for. And it's one that we're looking forward to getting ready for next year.
Coach Gannon, how did you see him grow over the course of a year? Because like it was new for you last year, it was new for him. And he obviously is somebody that has incredible passion and energy, but well-respected as an X and O guy too. How did you see him grow in that role?
Yeah, JG and his staff did a tremendous job. I mean, I think, again, that's a huge task. That's a huge job. There's a lot on his shoulders, and there's a lot of responsibility, and there's things that that came with my job. There's things that come with his job that you can never prepare for until you get through them. And so, the way that JG handled his his responsibilities with the entire football organization, the leadership that he provided, the energy that he provided, the oversight on the preparation that we went into each week with, and really ultimately the competitiveness that our team displayed over the last month of the season, just really, really put us in a great spot. And so, I know he's as excited as I am going into this offseason. He also knows that, hey, we got to start over, and we got to start over from ground zero with the 2024 team. And, we're looking forward to that. And that starts now. The process of the team building starts now as we're in phase 2, and we'll be in phase 3 here in a couple of weeks. But just his oversight and his leadership and the maturity and accountability that he brought to the position just really put our team in a great position here moving forward.
I know you're always watching tape, whether it's college tape or tape of the Cardinals or other film, when you're trying to figure out, if there's a guy that gets cut in camp or even in the course of a season, whether it's somebody you want to bring into the team. It's interesting. I've been working a ton of NBA with Bob Myers. He's been on most of the games Bob's done. I've been with him. We've had a couple playoff games together, and Bob was the longtime GM of the Golden State Warriors, won 4 championships, and he's really good on games. His perspective is really unique. So my question for you is the way you evaluate and the way a general manager looks at NFL players, schemes, is it different than how, if you were a coach or a player, you would look at it? Because I feel like Bob's perspective is really unique and interesting.
Yeah, I think there is a difference between how a coach and how a scout look at how a player will fit. And so, I think that's something that we have to take into account. And so, as scouts, we have to understand schematically what the coaches are going to be asking players to do. And then ultimately, it's our job as scouts to project whether or not the player has the skill set to do the things that we're asking them to do, because what they're being asked to do in college may be vastly different. Now, we don't want to hold that against the player. We don't want to, ding them for, hey, this guy doesn't play coverage the way we play. So, well, is that because he's not asked to do it, or is that because there's a physical limitation that he cannot do it that way? And so, I think that's on us as scouts, and that's through constant communication with the coaching staff, JG and I, just understanding what type of players and what skill sets we're looking for. And then it's our job as scouts to go out there and find those players and say why this player can fit in this scheme and why he cannot. And so not every player can, and our job as scouts is as much about eliminating players as it is finding players. And so, our scouts have done a great job of that. We'll continue to drill that into all of us, and that's something that we can all get better at. But yeah, there certainly are differences between the way coaches look at guys and scouts look at guys.
Did you get to see, speaking of that, even though Bill Belichick is a coach, he obviously heavily involved in personnel, did you get to see him at all during? I know you were busy, but did you see any of the TV stuff on him during the draft?
I didn't see the TV stuff. I heard it went well. I did happen to tune into the Tom Brady roast last night and saw him out there in a much different environment. Not a PG situation, but it was highly entertaining. I enjoyed that.
Did some of the stories you heard? Did you say, "Oh yeah, I remember"?
They were phenomenal. It was like a trip down memory lane, seeing all those guys that were on the team when I was there, and seeing those. So that was cool. That was cool to see up there.
I wonder how Tom is feeling this morning because he looked like he was enjoying himself.
Might have been a little overserved, but I don't want to speculate on that. Yeah.
Hey, thanks, Monty. Appreciate the time, man.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate it.
Thanks.